witnessed my parents do and what they taught us was Matthew 25:40 is, no matter what you do to the least of them, you've done it unto me. And, and just meeting someone where he was at and loving on him, and here I'm in the same outfit he's in, but I wanted to love on him. And I noticed that the more I did that, I forgot about those bars in front of me. And it started happening here and there with other people, just sharing stories and loving on them and encouraging them. I went to rehab and got out. A few years later, have 6 surgeries in 2 years, right back on medicine again. And at that time we were in Buffalo, same cycle started to happen again. So we returned down here.
Welcome to Just Men, a life-changing program that resonates hope as well as encouragement. The program that gives you information and inspiration for the glory of God. I'm your host, Jeff Tate, and thank you for joining Just Men. On today's program, we have a very special guest. This is his first time being on Just Men. Please welcome Brother Larry Fish. Brother Fish,
Hey, brother.
welcome to Just Men.
Thank you for this.
Well, I tell you, man,
Appreciate it.
before we even get started, let me say you add value to Just Men, and we're grateful and honored for your presence.
Thank you.
And so before we begin to start turning the pages of your life, let's begin on talk a little bit about just who is Larry Fish and the transformation in your life.
Who is Larry Fish? I knew you were going to ask me this question because I did my research a little bit. And the interesting thing is you realize that who you think you are, who you tell yourself you are, and who you are, God's eyes and others, is completely different. That's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned in recent years. You're not who you tell yourself or who you think you are at all, And I've realized over the last maybe decade that even, some of this deep, dark stuff that I went through, there was still a light there because I became a Christian at 10, walked away from it at 20. And, but it didn't completely walk away, walked away from religion and church. I was hurt and angry, and but no matter what happened or where I was, and this is again looking backwards now. You don't realize it at the moment, that I love people. I love serving, even in when I'm going through my own issues, or it doesn't matter where I'm at. I'm happy when I'm serving others. And that was taught to our entire family, my sister included. And we have an interesting family, not so typical family. I'm the oldest of 4. Mom and Dad, I was the first. I was born in '69, but less than 10 months later, my sister came along, and parents had the typical family dream of just, fantastic parents. And within, by the time the mid-'70s, they had two more boys, John, and Billy. And at about 2 years old, John was diagnosed. They didn't really have the right diagnosis. Right now, he is diagnosed with autism and multiple disabilities. But in the early '70s, they really didn't have a handle on autism as of yet. And Billy was born in '73, and he had an issue at birth and had severe brain damage and had multiple disabilities, has multiple disabilities. So that's really, when you say who is Larry Fish, that's where I got to go back to, because that was the beginning of becoming who I am, and that foundation of what our family was about, and the calling to agapeo love, or unconditional love, and spending a lifetime learning what that is, and now carrying it over in the metal community, the music community, and even in carrying it everywhere. So that's the long answer.
Talk to me a little bit about the transformation process and how what it took for you to be awakened when you say it was always there? And one of the things I think that resonates so time is we don't recognize that it is there. And the word recognize in its essence means to know again. In other words, we already knew, or we knew once before. We just don't recognize them. And it's like when we see someone and go, man, I just didn't recognize. And then all of a sudden, when the relationship is about coming together and bonding, go, oh, now I remember. So talk to me a little about those moments and times where, as Saul on his road to Damascus brought about change, what happened with you and what brought about the awakening in your life?
Well, you have to be at the very bottom to realize that a transformation in your life is needed. And when I said I walked away from the church, I mean, I definitely didn't walk away from God, but I definitely wanted nothing to do with religion. And I was hurt. It started. I was brought up in a church in Western New York, and went to youth groups and went to youth retreats, and watched my parents birth an organization inside of our church where we grew up that serviced families with disabled kids. And so they were going through a really interesting time, and that's a whole nother thing. But myself, I took a missions trip when I was 16 years old I actually celebrated my 16th birthday in Mexico City. And we went with a Christian rock band, and we spent some time down there physically building a church and handing out tracts and just loving on people. And so that was the summer of '86. I'm sorry, summer of '85. And when I came home, I really, something happened there, because when I came home, I couldn't believe the abject poverty that I saw. People standing in the pouring rain just to get a tract that shared about Christ on it, And I think it was a culture shock. It was a culture shock. And to see the difference, what I saw there and what I was experiencing here inside my church life in general. And then fast forward a few months, and it was the major earthquake that happened in Mexico City. I think 20-some thousand people died. The hotel that we stayed in. Now, Mexico City at that time was a city of like 10 million people. And this hit a very specific part of the city, and it was basically everywhere we had just been. The hotel we stayed at was destroyed. And I was like the first time I think I had like anger towards God, in a mistaken way that, just obviously we all do, people have done that. It's part of human nature. You get angry and have emotions, and when something bad happens, many of us blame God. I did, but I didn't understand the full scope of what I'm sharing here until I was much older. And then a few series of other events happened, which we don't have to get into. I was beat up, and it was happened inside of the church I was at. I lost a dear friend, and that wasn't handled really well. And I'm just like, I'm done. This is not my thing, And walked away for quite a long time. When I lost my dad in '92, he died very young. He died at 46, and that sent me on a tailspin. See, my first experience with drugs, we're going to talk about my addiction a little bit. It wasn't the typical thing where you say, you start with marijuana and then you progress down the road. The first drug that I ever took in my life was my father's pain medication from his drawer, okay? And he had a brain tumor and, needed that. And so, but that, I saw how he acted different, and here I'm suffering through pain, and he would take his medication, his mood would change, and he was happier. And I wanted to be happier, You know, I was angry, and I knew my dad was close to dying, you know, and that he wasn't going to be, you know, live much longer than he did. We knew that was going to happen. So I had a lot of emotional pain, and I used those pills to cover that up. You know, no physical pain at that point. That came 15 years later. And so you fast forward, you know, about a decade, and I had been through a marriage. I had 2 children. Marriage fell apart. That didn't take long. I thought that getting married and having children would replace the loss of my father that really I hung on to really hard, and had a difficult time and stuck in that anger phase of grief, probably 12 years. And I thought that would cover up and replace the holes in my life, you know. And you know now that's definitely not it. You know, there's nothing can fill that hole, but God can comfort that hole, you know, when you have loss or lose a loved one. But I wasn't ready for that yet. And get into the late 90s, and I make a trip to a music festival, 1998. And that was the real beginning of the transformation here. And that was when I met Pastor Bob and Pastor Bob Beeman of Sanctuary. And like, wow, there's this whole nother version of Christianity that I didn't even know existed, with the music that I loved, with hard rock, and what I experienced at Cornerstone, I think was still part of my foundation, because I haven't even gone through the worst parts of my life yet, you know. I wasn't even there yet, you know. It was about a decade down the road. And but I made a trip to Nashville a few months after that, trip to Cornerstone in '98. Came down here to shoot a music video and for a band, and stayed at Pastor Bob's house. And 6 months later, I was living here after I made a trip here. And that was like I think you call it the last brick in my foundation, so that I didn't die over these next 18 years because of what happened. And it was all about love. I mean, when I'll tell you, the first time anybody walked into Pastor Bob's house, not just myself, I've heard many people say it, you were awash in a level of peace that I had never experienced before. And listening and getting taught by him and everybody in Sanctuary, the people that I was introduced to, one of them became a professional doctor of mine that I met through Pastor Bob. That was like the real beginning. But I had to go through to get here. I still had a really bad road that I had to go down. And so when you already kind of struggle with addiction, you add in physical pain to that mix. And a health condition. I mean, I've had 8 back surgeries since '03. '04 was my first. And first surgery was to make the pain better and get off narcotics. That didn't happen. I was very close to death after that surgery. I was still wearing the clamshell brace. This is maybe 10 days after my surgery. And first trip out of the house since the surgery, and we went to, my wife and I go to Hermitage, get some sheets for my new hospital bed, you know, and I said, I don't feel right, something's wrong, not feeling so hot here. And Mary rushed me to my doctor's office that was about 2 blocks away, and he saw me and knew exactly what was happening. I was barely conscious, and I had a blood. He knew right away. I had a blood clot and thrown it. Things are kind of fuzzy after that, but this was the change, the turning point, because that trip in the hospital I wake up and I'm sitting up and kind of out of it, and the doctor's like laying me flat, and he's like, brother, I should be apologizing to your wife right now. He's like, less than 12% survive what you just survived. He's like, you have a 3 millimeter clot in your left lung, and an 11 millimeter clot in your left leg, and you're going to be laying flat for about 2 weeks. You can't even sit up. And here I just had back surgery. I was in agony laying flat, agony. So on comes the morphine. You know, this was the beginning. And I left the hospital with a prescription for OxyContin. And that took not even a year. Within 3 months of that, I was taking almost double of what was prescribed. Scraping them off, crushing them up, right up the nose. And it progressed, got worse, started having problems in my marriage. I mean, you'd look at videos or pictures of me back in between 03 to 06, and I look horrible, you know. You could see it. And it began a cycle of a few years of increasing the dosage. I'd take the same amount, run out, go into withdrawal, hit the streets, get whatever I could get. The only thing I never touched heroin. This is the only reason why I'm still sitting here with you. I never touched that drug. And I was afraid. I was afraid that of dying, of overdosing, because of how I knew how much I would take Opana and OxyContin and all that. And so I was afraid and never did. I'm very thankful for that. Very thankful. The thing is, you know, once I was in rehab and got to know people that struggled with, you know, that used heroin, they said if they had an OxyContin or a Opana on the table or a bag of heroin, they would choose the OxyContin or Opana any day because it was stronger and they knew what was in it. And, you know, now you have people just falling over dead you get a microgram on you, and people are dying now because of what's in them. So 2006 is when it all came to a head for me. And again, if you want to go back to my transformation of where God was, He was there, but I was snuffing out my spirit. I wasn't nourishing my spirit, I was snuffing it out. So I didn't feel anything then. At that time, you know, it's pretty impossible to feel anything when you're on that level of what I was on, you know. My back was getting worse. They wanted to do surgery again, and I was depressed about that, and still in a stuck place with Dad. And so the cycle kept going. Run out of medicine, hit the streets, sick for a few days, get that script, you know. It was never ending.
You know, one of the things that, and I think is very important for us to talk about, is the victory, the recovery process. Because sometimes we spend so much time in the process of our despair that we lose, or people lose, the power that is evident, obviously, in your life and how it works its way through. It's beautiful how everything you describe, it shows the deepest despair that the human body or the human spirit can go through, and yet nothing can separate you from God's love. Talk about the power and the rehabilitation, because there's many people are listening and they have also been shackled with a cycle like yours, and they're still trying to get the victory. They're trying to get that. So talk a bit about that power and what you had to do and way you've seen God in a deeper way than you ever did before, beyond religion. I think what you talked about is knowing Him greater than the way you knew Him before, you know, sort of in the box of doctrine. Talk a little bit about that process and deliverance.
I guess the first time I can remember feeling that spark and light inside of me was the 90 days I spent in jail when I hit the rock bottom. You know, I committed a robbery, I strong-armed, snagged money out of a drawer, got beat, you know, have a scar to prove it, was chased, ended up in jail. And I was there for 90 days. And there was a gentleman who I shared a cell with, and he was in jail for similar circumstances. He was an opiate. He had opiate addiction, And while we shared our cell, his son committed suicide. And I remember that moment where I forgot about everything that was happening to me. It didn't matter, and I just wanted to love him and comfort him and do something. He had to go to his son's funeral in orange clothes, you know. They allowed him about 90 minutes. And he came back, and he was, I couldn't imagine here. You always think you got it bad until you meet the guy next to you, you know, in the pits. The pit is a different depths for everybody. So my mother had sent me a Bible, specifically people going through addiction, a recovery Bible. And we started sharing scriptures. I don't even remember what, but it was the one that always stuck out in my mind, and what I witnessed my parents do and what they taught us was Matthew 25:40. Is, you know, no matter what you do, the least of them, you've done it unto me. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and just meeting someone where he was at and loving on him, and here I'm in the same outfit he's in, you know, but I wanted to love on him. And I noticed that the more I did that, I forgot about those bars in front of me. And it started happening here and there with other people, you know, just sharing stories and loving on them and encouraging them. I went to rehab and got out. A few years later, have 6 surgeries in 2 years, right back on the medicine again. And at that time we were in Buffalo, same cycle started to happen again. So we returned down here a few years ago. And I wasn't getting the care that I needed in New York State. We had gone back because we knew my mother was sick, and that was when the real growth, I would probably say, you know, it took me till 45 years old, the real thing hit me. And it wasn't something like magic that hit me overnight. There was no, like, you know, seeing light and something happening and like, oh, I'm alive again. Mm-hmm. It was this has been a very gradual process with me, and a very long process, but I started looking for natural remedies to get off opiates without replacing, you know, without medication, get off the withdrawal. I did that. I started taking classes, living well with chronic pain, grieving mindfully, learning how to grieve. And the director of all this, interestingly enough, was a psychologist. He went to school with Pastor Bob's sister. And I was introduced to him years ago, and now here he's in charge of this amazing place and transforming how they treat people with chronic pain. Not just throwing medication at them and say, see you later, or cut you open, you know. It was a whole different process, and got close with Bob again, and my wife and I had come through this time in our life where most women would have left. I got to say that. I mean, that woman stuck with me through when most women would have went, see you later. I mean, so it was just a very gradual process. But the more I embraced love and stuck to loving people where they were at, and not only that, but like the love my wife gave me by standing by me, rather than, she had every she lost a promotion because of what I did, was evicted and moved, and here she stuck with me. I mean, that's a testimony in itself. And now we've come full circle and healed from all that, and are just, you know, right now reaching out to the metal community. My sister and I are doing things with other siblings of the disabled, and kind of carrying on what that foundation and what our parents instilled in us about unconditional love. And so that is the victory and the transformation. It wasn't overnight, but it definitely began to happen once I finally was able to walk away from the narcotics. And then I began nourishing my spirit with not just the clinical stuff that I did, also with, am I allowed to say your name? The Admiral, Dr. Grogan, It's like some of the things that this man taught me in the last year and a half. You know, just like that last little, you just get the right people around you and in your life. And yeah.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, as we, and I know there's so much that we can talk about in terms of just the whole transformation process, the awakening process. And what's always been dear to my heart is how people come into God's love in their own way, and how he brings people in their lives to sort of cultivate that love that has always been there, that we somehow forgotten. Share with us what words that really inspires you when you talk to others, to when they are going through, you know, difficult times, and when they're going through some challenges in their lives. How do you become the beacon of hope for them to hold on to, you know, God's unchanging hand, his love? I think one of the things that I've had to learn over the years of walking with God is to relearn that nothing separates me from him. Nothing. In the last moment, share with us on your heart in terms of what you share with others to bring about that awakening love, that unchanging love, that agape love, the unconditional love, that nothing, not religion, not doctrine, not even your belief system can separate you from the love of God in Christ. Share that.
You know, we've all seen that term, that God is love. You could take that is away and make it an equal sign, right? So when you're in a dark place, go love on somebody who needs it. Go serve the homeless. Go visit someone with a disability, and you'll see in a group home, and love on them. Roll pennies if you have to put gas in your car to go do something kind and share and love on them, even when you're in your worst spot. And something's going to happen to you, I guarantee it. And there's a joy in loving and giving and meeting people where they're at, that minus the judgment, and throwing your arms around them, or someone in a wheelchair who may not be able to speak, but you look into their heart and you see pure spirit, because that's how you're going to get it back, when you don't even expect it. But give and black, white, metal, rap, doesn't matter, you know, love on everyone. And as I like to say, you want to make the world a better place, commit a random act of kindness to a complete stranger. And that's just kind of like a motto that I've been going with, even when I feel like going curl up. And it's when you're giving it away, you're open to receive it too.
Wow. Stay focused.
Thank you.
Wow. Awesome. You blessed me.
Thanks.
Wow.
Appreciate that.
Yes. Woo. Man. Yeah. Good. That's good.
Thank you for
That's
having me.
good. No, thank you. We gotta have you back.